The film begins with a girl named Belle, who was just finished her Thai boxing practice and was getting ready to catch the bus. At that time, Belle has a crush on a boy named S who is in her school, and she secretly watches him at the bus stop. Once got on the bus, Belle decided to follow him home. On the bus, there was a sudden stop, and Belle accidentally bumped into S. That's when he realized she was there. He was surprised to see Belle on the bus and wondered why she was there. At that moment, Belle explained that she lived in the same area as him. Then, once got off the bus, Belle also got off and said her house was nearby. S was skeptical because he had never seen her in his neighborhood before. He knew everyone in his neighborhood. When they reached S's house, he offered to walk Belle home, but she declined, saying she knew the area well. However, Belle ended up getting lost while walking alone. Luckily, S came by on his bicycle and offered to guide her to the main road where she could wait for the bus. There, Belle admitted that she had lied about living nearby and apologized. Upon hearing that, Hess decided to accompany her, because he needed to return some comics to the school's book borrowing place. When Belle and Sess went to the book borrowing place, Belle confessed that she liked reading comics too. However, when S asked her about the comics she had read, she got confused and couldn't remember any titles. Since S thought Belle was into comics, he recommended a few for her. The next day at school, Belle shared the embarrassing moment with her friends Punk and Om. She also mentioned S's interest in comics and her plan to read the ones he suggested to have something to talk about. The problem was that Belle didn't really enjoy reading, so Punk suggested that Om read the comics and then tell Belle the story. On another day, Belle and her friends watched S playing ball and tried to come up with a plan to make him like Belle. Punk remembered how Belle once dropped a paint container in front of a guy to get his attention and make him notice her. So Punk suggested Belle do the same thing to S. On another day in class, S and his friend Fol were secretly snacking, while the teacher was teaching. Fol then asked S to go to the game shop, but S declined, so Fol tried asking their classmates Nay and Tu Ween, who were sitting in the back. Unfortunately, Nay and Tu Ween also said no. Meanwhile, the teacher noticed Fol not paying attention and called him to the front to answer questions. In a different class, Belle and her friends were paying attention to S because their classes were opposite each other. However, S suddenly closed the window curtain next to him, which annoyed Belle. At that time, she had been trying to get his attention since the start of the semester, and it seemed like her efforts weren't working, even though she had successfully attracted many other guys before. After school, Om, who was friends with Belle and Punk, shared a funny comic story she heard from S there. Belle wondered why S recommended the comic to her, especially when it featured a sexy woman saving a hero. Punk believed that S might want Belle to be the character in the comic. Punk then took out some art supplies and said he would come up with a plan to help Belle make S fall in love with her. The next day, when the school bell rang, Belle and her friends rushed to S's classroom because Punk learned that S had picket duty to clean the class that day. After Punk called Nay out of the classroom, Belle prepared herself and approached a masked male student who she thought was S. Following their plan, Belle accidentally dropped her painting supplies, and the male student helped her pick them up. When Belle removed the mask from the helpful student, she was surprised to find that it was not Tess but Fol, who seemed captivated by her beauty. Belle and her two friends, who were hiding nearby, assumed another male student was S, but instead they found Tu Ween with a nosebleed after seeing Belle's beauty. Unfortunately, S had already left the class, and Belle's plan had failed. Shortly after, Belle and her friends then gathered to find other ways to get S' attention. During their discussion, Punk found S's friends a bit unusual, especially Nay, who Punk suspected might have a crush on Tess, and pretended to be tomboyish to get close to him. Meanwhile, Om remembered that Belle had to return a comic to the library that day, where she might bump into S. Without thinking, the three of them went to the library, but when S didn't show up, Om and Punk decided to go home. Belle, however, waited for S until evening and got bitten by mosquitoes. At the same time, Hess was busy studying at home. After several hours of waiting, Belle's patience finally paid off when S came to the library to borrow a book. At that time, Belle followed him as he rode his bicycle home, and just wondered why she was waiting for someone. When Belle got bitten by a mosquito, she had to pretend she wasn't waiting for anyone. S suspected that Belle liked him and advised her to stop pursuing a romantic relationship because he wasn't interested. However, Belle didn't seem to give up and shouted her determination as S pedaled away without looking back. A few days later after school, Punk and Om planned to visit Belle, who had been absent from school for a few days. Their classmate, Orn, expressed concern that Belle might not be able to represent the class in the Thai boxing match if she was sick. There, Punk reassured Orn that Belle would be fine and compete. After Orn left, Punk shared her suspicion that Orn might not want Belle to be the class representative in the Thai boxing match. Once Punk and Om arrived at Belle's house, they all discussed why Belle had been absent. Belle confessed that she hadn't gone to school because she hoped S would show longing for her on his social media, but he hadn't posted anything. Punk believed that S wasn't into social media. At that time, Belle also tried different ways to get closer to Bess, including suggesting they practice soccer, even though they couldn't play it well in the end. The following day, Belle and her friends planned to play soccer to get S attention, but he wasn't at the soccer field. Suddenly remembered it was the day of the inter-class basketball match, so she figured S might be playing for his class. Her guess turned out to be right because they spotted S playing basketball, which kept Belle's attention on him until a basketball accidentally hit her in the face. When Belle woke up, she found herself in the school's medical room with a bruise on her right eye. Punk and Om were there with her, and as they left the room, Punk told Belle that S had visited while she was unconscious and apologized for accidentally throwing the ball at her. In that moment, Belle looked annoyed that Punk didn't wake her up right away. On a different day, S, who was getting ready for School Scout activities, saw his parents leaving their rooms without greeting him. In the dining room, his parents seemed indifferent, and his father even asked him to go to school alone because he had a meeting at the office. Once arrived at school, he joined the other students in the schoolyard as the teacher instructed. At that moment, Tumin informed S that Belle had been constantly looking at them, but S didn't pay much attention to it. Later, when returning to class, Tumin suggested that S should apologize to Belle directly for the basketball incident from the other day. Tumin even invited S to meet Belle during their scout activities. At that time, S just smiled at Tumin's unusual behavior and reminded him to focus on their lessons for the day. Meanwhile, Belle and her friends were secretly watching S from behind a stack of bricks until a passing teacher spotted them, and they decided to leave. After school, Tumin asked S to wait for Belle to come home so he could apologize. There, S mentioned that he had never seen Tumin so enthusiastic about something, and Tumin admitted that he simply wanted to keep S company, even though S felt like he was the one keeping Tumin company. Since Belle didn't show up, they played a board game and chatted while waiting, and S mentioned that Belle's house was close to the school. Tumin was surprised that S knew where Belle lived, but S confessed that it was just a guess. After waiting for a while, Tumin eventually went home, and S saw Nate playing football, so he joined her. That evening, S received a mysterious package with a medal inside, with kanji characters on it, but there was no sender's name on it. The following day, S and Full had to go to school on the weekend to prepare for the school festival. S didn't pay much attention to Full's complaints and kept playing with a Rubik's Cube in his hand. He mentioned receiving a medal with kanji characters on it, but there was no sender's name. Full suspected that the sender wanted to challenge S with a puzzle, so he invited S to solve it. At that time, S shared his suspicion that Belle might be the one who sent the gift, because she was the only girl who kept approaching him. Full was surprised that S didn't give Belle a chance to get closer to him, but S felt he was too young for romance. Full told him about their younger neighbor who had multiple girlfriends, which made us laugh. Then he asked Full for advice on how to avoid Belle, but before they could discuss it further, their teacher called them to join the other students. Shortly after, S and Nay were assigned to paint together, and Belle joined them. Nay, who didn't like Belle being there, asked her to fetch some paint, but the paint ended up spilling on the painting, and they started blaming each other. Punk, who was also annoyed, seemed to push Nay, and she fell. At that moment, S, frustrated by the commotion, finally shouted and took the blame for the paint spill, silencing everyone. Even though Belle wasn't at fault because Nay had deliberately refused the paint she offered, she felt sad and worried that S might not like her anymore. That evening, Belle was still upset about the school incident, but her mood improved when Punk sent her a photo of S visiting her in the school maintenance room from the other day. Belle even shared it on her social media. In the past at school, Belle was upset with P, her boyfriend, who had cheated on her and was pleading for her forgiveness. Meanwhile, S was playing football with his friends, and their ball often rolled toward P, annoying him. At that moment, Belle, determined not to forgive P, suggested that they break up. P arrogantly claimed that there was no one better than him in the school. Belle became even more emotional upon hearing this and mentioned that S was a better person than P. From that point on, Belle started pursuing S to become her boyfriend. Now in the present, Belle is sitting on a bench in the school garden, still thinking about the paint incident from the other day. Shortly after, Punk, accompanied by approached her and informed her that they needed to make Nate confess to dropping the paint, clearing Belle's name in front of S. At that time, Punk had even hired someone to follow Nate after school to find out her home address and send her a gift package on her birthday. Inside the package, Punk included a letter, pretending to be S, asking Nate to admit her mistake of spilling paint during the festival preparations. The next morning, Punk, Belle, and discussed the gift package sent to Nate on her birthday, which Punk had found out about through social media. Punk then asked Belle to meet S while appearing sad and confessing that she was the one responsible for the paint spill a few days ago. On the other hand, Nate arrived in class and proudly showed a gift she had received to S, making sure he knew it wasn't from him. S shook his head, and Nate voiced her suspicion that Belle and her friends had sent the gift while pretending to be S during their discussion about the paint spill incident from the other day. When S read the letter Nate showed him, he asked who had spilled the paint, and Nate immediately confessed that she didn't do it. S seemed to believe that confession, and Nate finally accepted the gift package. Meanwhile, Belle and her friends secretly observed S from their classroom and felt happy, thinking their plan to make Nate confess had succeeded. After school, following Punk's suggestion, Belle met S at the bus stop. With her face turned away, Belle, sitting next to S, admitted that she was the one who had made the mistake with the paint a few days ago. Unfortunately, S didn't listen and quickly left as the bus arrived. Realizing that S had go with the bus, Belle hurried to catch the same one and tried to sit next to S. However, an intimidating man was sitting between them, which made Belle feel scared, so she moved away from his seat. When Scott off at the bus stopped near his house and noticed Belle also getting off, he asked if there was something she wanted to tell him. With hesitation, Belle admitted that she was the one responsible for the paint incident and apologized to Nate. S replied that he already knew the truth and didn't mind it anymore before he walked away, leaving Belle behind. A few days later, during the school festival, Belle and her friends were dressed in ghost costumes to add some excitement to the event. Unfortunately, not many students were interested in taking photos with them, except for Tutoring, who had been paying attention to Belle from the beginning. Meanwhile, Punk apologized to Belle because her plan to bring Belle closer to S had failed. But when Punk noticed Tutoring showing interest in Belle, she suggested using Tutoring to help bring Belle closer to S. Punk, also called Tutoring, and asked for his assistance in packing some performance equipment. Soon after, Punk invited Tutoring to have a meal together, but he agreed only if Belle joined them. Afterward, Belle and her friends were eating with Tutoring in the school cafeteria behind the school. Tutoring shared that he had asked S to meet Belle and apologized for the earlier basketball incident. This news excited Belle, and she intended to seek Tutoring's help in getting closer to S. When Belle got home, she found a note from her parents saying they would be home late. She immediately contacted Punk and to keep her company. While enjoying the food Belle had prepared, the three of them discussed the best plan to approach S. With the final semester exams approaching, Punk came up with the idea that, as seniors, they could become study tutors for S and his friends. At first, Belle was hesitant because she felt S and his friends were already known as smart students who didn't need tutoring from seniors. However, Punk tried to convince Belle that it would help her understand S's world as a smart student and could get his attention. This motivated her to take her studies more seriously, surprising her mother with her newfound dedication. A few days before the final semester exams, Belle planned to approach S to become his tutor, but she was surprised when Nate showed up. Sensing the tension, S said he would go buy a drink and left. In S's absence, Belle asked Nate if she liked S, but Nate seemed indifferent to Belle's words, making Belle suspect that Nate really had feelings for S. Belle eventually admitted her own feelings for S and asked Nate if they could compete fairly for S' attention. Meanwhile, S met Tutoring, who revealed Belle's plans to approach S because Tutoring didn't want to keep it a secret from his best friend. After the final semester exams, Punk and relaxed at Belle's house to discuss their plans to bring her closer to S. During their conversation, Punk mentioned that P had repeatedly asked for Belle's new phone number, but Belle refused to share it with him. This made Belle sad and Punk noticed, so she playfully tossed her into the swimming pool, and the three friends ended up swimming together. Looking back, because P couldn't accept Belle's decision to break up with him, he challenged Belle to win S's heart. He gave her a deadline that if she couldn't have a relationship with S before graduating, P would pursue her again. This motivated Belle to work hard to win S' affection and avoid going back to P. Meanwhile, now all the students are busy with their activities, and Belle is still working hard to grab S' attention. While observing S playing with a ball, Punk asked Belle when she would join in, even though Belle had been practicing for a while. As fate would have it, S's ball rolled towards Belle, and when she returned it, she expressed her interest in playing ball with him. Sometime later, S and Tutoring attended a school scout camp where they had to complete various tasks that night. Unfortunately, Tutoring became too tired to continue, so S rushed to seek help from their friends. However, S didn't pay attention as he was about to cross the road and ended up getting hit by a passing motorbike. Belle, who was supervising the event, rushed to help him, while Punk and the others assisted the fallen motorbike rider. There, Belle insisted on helping S, despite his attempts to refuse her help. However, Belle paid no heed to S' objections and continued assisting him until they reached the treatment tent. There, S eventually thanked her for her help. Meanwhile, Punk, and Tutoring, who were outside the tent, noticed Belle treating S's injured leg. Surprisingly, all these events were part of a plan concocted by Punk and the others to give Belle an opportunity to get closer to S. Punk also warned Tutoring not to spill the beans about their scheme to S, as she had paid the motorbike rider handsomely. Tutoring agreed to keep the secret and asked Punk to arrange a time for him to have a private conversation with Belle. There, Punk lied and said she would talk to Belle about it later. When midnight came, Full woke up because he couldn't sleep and suggested they take a stroll around the school. S also can't sleep, agreed to Full's idea, and they headed to the senior class. Meanwhile, Belle and her friends were struggling to stay awake outside their tent while waiting for their shift to end. Punk then proposed that the two of them go for a walk if they weren't feeling sleepy. Although initially hesitant, Belle and eventually decided to go along with Punk's plan. They'd wandered around until Belle suggested checking S's tent. Arriving at a row of junior tents, opened one of them, only to be surprised by a junior coming out to use the restroom. In a role as a supervisor, Punk had to escort the junior to the school restroom. Belle then tried to open another tent, which turned out to be S's, but she only found Tutoring sleeping inside. This made her anxious, so she began searching around, including checking the student restrooms to find S. There, Punk tried to reassure Belle, saying that S would return to the tent soon, but Belle insisted on continuing her search. Meanwhile, S was in a room with Full, who was busy playing the guitar and seemed unafraid of getting caught. At that time, Full tried to persuade S that they wouldn't be caught because everyone was asleep and even suggested going to the rooftop. But S declined due to his sore leg. Shortly after Full went to the rooftop by himself, Belle found S sitting alone in one of the classrooms and scolded him for leaving the tent without permission. However, she also felt relieved to see that this was okay. While Belle was still scolding S, Punk and intentionally closed and locked the classroom door to give Belle some private time with S. At that time, seemed worried about Punk's idea, especially as Belle started banging on the classroom door for help. However, Punk insisted that they needed to use this chance to help Belle get closer to S. Punk planned to unlock the door after a few hours and suggested that take a nap. Meanwhile, Full was shouting for help because Punk had also locked him on the rooftop, preventing him from assisting S and Belle. In the classroom, Belle sat next to S and began asking about his experiences with love relationships. S admitted that he had never been in a relationship and wasn't interested in that sort of thing. Belle suspected that it was due to his lack of experience or his failure to recognize his own feelings. Then, while trying to get closer to him, Belle offered to teach S about love, but he declined. Belle also wondered why S had no feelings for her, and after discovering that he had never listened to a love song, she put earphones on him so he could listen to one. Regrettably, S decided to remove the earphones, stating that he preferred reading comics over listening to songs. Belle, who was becoming frustrated, asked why S didn't try to understand her interests and offered him a jacket. However, he returned the jacket and requested that she stop pursuing him. Belle, determined, moved closer to S until she suddenly hugged him. In her teary-eyed state, she expressed her hope that one day he would realize that love isn't always a bad thing. The following morning, Punk and realized they hadn't unlocked the classroom door where Belle and S were. They hurried to the classroom but were too late, as the teacher and other students were already untying the door. They were surprised to find Belle and S inside. This incident led to the school calling Belle and S parents, and both were suspended from school for 2 weeks because they were believed to have intentionally isolated themselves in the classroom. Punk felt guilty and tried to apologize to Belle, who requested some time to calm down. When Belle returned to school 2 weeks later, she still appeared upset and didn't respond to Punk and Om when they tried to talk to her. She even yelled at her 2 best friends for speaking loudly about homework. There, Belle announced that she wanted to end all her effort to get close to S, leaving Punk and Om shocked, especially since they had put in a lot of effort to help Belle with her plan. Punk suspected that this was because P had asked Belle to date him again, but Belle didn't answer and instead expressed her frustration with Punk, leading to an argument between them. Punk was really mad because she kept getting blamed, so she threw a book in front of her and left the classroom. Om tried to chase after Punk to calm her down, but Punk got even more upset and thought Belle was being selfish, even though Punk and Om always tried to help Belle. Finally, Punk decided to leave, leaving Om confused and stuck in the middle of her 2 friends who were fighting. Meanwhile, S was seen looking at Belle's classroom multiple times, even though the window next to her seat had curtains. That night, while S was in his room, he accidentally dropped his pencil case that had some Japanese kanji letters he found in a mysterious gift. S tried to arrange the letters but didn't understand their meaning, so he threw them all in the trash. Going back to the night when Belle and S were stuck in the classroom, S allowed Belle to fall asleep on his shoulder because she didn't wake up despite him calling her name several times. After adjusting her head position and removing her glasses, S admitted that he didn't think he would like her, even though he knew she was a good person. He also mentioned that he would try to understand Belle better if he ever started to have feelings for her. Surprisingly, Belle was just pretending to be asleep, and she cried when she heard what S said. In the present, Belle is still thinking about what S said to her. She decides to sit alone at the edge of the field until Punk and Om come over. There, Punk gives Belle some food and a drink and apologizes for her earlier rude behavior. Belle also apologizes for making Punk feel embarrassed. After school, the 3 of them go to the cafeteria to talk about Belle's plans. Belle admits that she will stop trying to pursue, because she believes he can't possibly like her, and she doesn't want to be in a relationship right now. Upon hearing Belle's decision, Punk and Om promise to always support her. When they discuss their next plan, Belle mentions that there is someone suitable for Punk, which makes her curious. However, when Belle mentions Tuween's name, Punk feels annoyed. Just then, Tuween joins them and orders food from the noodle cellar. At that time, Tuween asks Punk for a favor, that he wants her to help him go to the cinema with Belle. This surprises Belle, and she immediately asks Punk for an explanation. Punk finally admits that she was forced to promise Tuween in exchange for his help in bringing Belle and S closer together. Since Belle doesn't want to go to the movies with Tuween, she offers to be his personal tutor as a thank you. Even though Tuween is disappointed with that decision, he accepts it, saying he'd rather study than go to the cinema. Meanwhile, Punk gives Tuween the food he ordered to keep him from talking too much in front of Belle. Tuween smiles happily, and Belle and Om laugh at their friend's behavior. Some time later, Belle and her friends kept their promise to tutor Tuween. However, he suddenly asked Punk to teach him another subject. Hearing that, Belle and Om tried not to laugh, but things got a bit awkward when S came and allowed Punk, Om, and Tuween to go buy food. This gave Belle a chance to chat with S. In that moment, Belle was surprised when S showed up, admitting that he had promised Tuween to be there. S suggested that Belle should also focus on studying her lessons, since he noticed she was taking extra classes after failing an exam. Not long after, P approached Belle and she invited him to talk. They discussed their agreement, which annoyed Belle, especially when P admitted he wasn't dating anyone else after their breakup. There, Belle reminded P that she hadn't graduated yet, so he shouldn't approach her. However, P argued that she would graduate in a few weeks and wasn't in a relationship with S. Upon hearing that, Belle became increasingly annoyed and asked him to leave. On another day, invited Belle and Punk to watch the class basketball finals. Surprisingly, S and the others also came to watch, and even Tuween seemed excited to watch the game next to Punk. During the match, Belle was almost hit by a basketball, but luckily, S sitting next to her caught it, joking that it was payment for accidentally hurting her before. Full was impressed by that action, but Nay felt annoyed and asked S to go play football with him. That night, Belle couldn't stop thinking about S. She kept looking at the photo of S visiting her in the treatment room until she fell asleep. The next day, Punk and Om were there to cheer Belle on during a Thai boxing match at school. Sadly, Belle had to fall after her opponent hit her hard. She got bruises on her eyes and had to be taken to the treatment room. When she woke up, Punk told her that S had come to support her during the match. This made Belle happy, and she forgot about her pain. Punk teased her, which made Belle feel embarrassed as S started paying attention to her. When Belle got home, she was surprised to find P waiting for her. Even though P claimed he just wanted to greet Belle's mother, Belle didn't believe him until he admitted that he missed her. Then he chose to go home after seeing that Belle felt uncomfortable with his presence. A few days later, after their exams were done, Belle and her best friend discussed which university to choose for their further studies. There, Belle mentioned she was considering studying in Chiang Mai, which made Pang and Am sad because it meant they wouldn't see Belle as often since Chiang Mai is far from Bangkok. Punk also wondered if Belle chose Chiang Mai because she knew P was studying there. Belle didn't really answer that question until Punk invited her two friends to celebrate completing their exams. Meanwhile, in the school cafeteria, Belle raised her glass and proposed that they should meet up there whenever they have a gathering. Punk agreed with the idea, joking that they should make sure the cafeteria doesn't go out of business since they always seem to be the only customers. Soon after, S and the others arrived, and Tumin joined Punk and the rest without paying much attention to Nay, who was unhappy about Tywin getting close to Belle's group. When they went home, Nay still seemed irritated and gave Belle a sarcastic look. While waiting for her parents to pick her up, Nay, who was with S, suddenly asked Belle about S's feelings. S admitted that he didn't have any special feelings for Belle until Nay finally confessed her feelings for him, saying they might never see each other again after she transferred schools, so she wanted to share her feelings. S stayed quiet when he heard Nay's confession. Before going home, S went to the book borrowing place and was surprised to find Am there. Am explained that she was borrowing some comics because Belle had asked her to. S was surprised, especially after Am mentioned parts of the comic, making him suspicious that Am might have read it. At that time, Am tried to cover it up by saying she only glanced at some scenes when Belle was reading it at school. S, sensing something, asked Am if she also liked him. Am hesitated, but eventually admitted that she had feelings for him, even before Belle pursued him. During this time, Am chose to let's go with Belle, because she knew how hard Belle had been trying to win S's heart. S then showed Am some kanji characters he had received as gifts and asked if they were all from her. Am confirmed it, so S asked her to explain the meaning of the kanji characters she had sent. However, Am refused to tell him and left. Belle overheard all of Am's statements and felt sad because she had been unaware of Am's feelings for S all along. On another day, Pete came to Belle's house and asked her to go out. Belle asked him to wait while she took a shower and got ready. When Belle finished bathing, she was surprised to find P in her room, which annoyed her. She asked him to wait in the living room. A little while later, she reluctantly went with P. When P brought Belle home, she saw Punk and Am waiting for her. Inside the house, Punk asked Belle about her plans for going to Chiang Mai University, and Belle told her that she would be leaving in 2 days. At that moment, Punk wondered why Belle and Am were mostly silent, especially since they were both crying and apologizing to each other. Punk, unaware of the problem, hugged her friends, thinking they were sad because they would soon be separated. Meanwhile, S was feeling a bit bored after Belle and her friends graduated. He even rode his bicycle around, trying to find Belle's house, but he couldn't locate it. When he got home, he opened social media and came across a Neo account with a post expressing longing feelings, which making him check Belle's social media account. There he saw her latest post, which featured a photo of her looking at him in the school treatment room. Seeing this post made S feel uneasy about his emotions. Because of these feelings, S wasn't very excited about starting his Neo class or playing football as he usually did. Instead, he preferred to sit on a bench where Belle and her friends used to watch him play ball. After a while, Tuin, who was in a different class, approached S and mentioned that he hadn't made any close friends in his new class. Tuin also invited S to play their usual board game, and S asked about the Japanese language class that Tuin had chosen. Tuin shared that he was happy to study a subject he liked, and S expressed his interest in Japanese as well. He suggested that S should request to be moved to the Japanese class. S then asked if Tuin still hung out with Punk and her friends, and S was happy to hear that Tuin did. Tuin, sensing that S wanted to see Belle, took out his cell phone and invited Punk to meet up. At that time, S was surprised to see Tuin using a cell phone because he had never seen him use one before. Tuin explained that he used it to send a goodnight message to Punk, which made S suspect that Tuin and Punk were dating. However, Tumin clarified that Punk considered him as a younger brother. After receiving a message from Punk, Tumin told S that they would meet at school the next day. The next day, Punk, who had met S and Tumin, mentioned that it was hard to get in touch with Belle since she went to Chungmei. Punk suspected that Belle had changed her phone number, so she planned to visit Belle's house and ask her mother for updates. This got us wondering if Belle was really studying in Chungmei, and Punk was pleased to see S getting curious about Belle. When Punk asked if S liked Belle, S seemed unsure about his feelings. Punk explained that if S felt lost and started missing Belle, it meant he had feelings for her. With some hesitation, S admitted that he indeed liked Belle. This made Punk even happier to hear, while Tumin mentioned that he had already known it, but S had never realized his own feelings. Soon after, they went to Belle's house, which seemed quiet as if no one was home. They decided to wait until evening, and eventually, Punk and Tumin went home, leaving S waiting in front of Belle's house. The next morning, S returned to Belle's house with comics and food. Belle's mother finally arrived and informed S that Belle was in Chungmei for college registration. She also gave S Belle's new phone number. That evening, S mustered the courage to call Belle, but when she answered, S went silent and hung up. Shortly after, when Belle called him back, S's assistant answered, and S asked the assistant not to tell Belle that he had just called her. In his room, S couldn't sleep, so he looked at a photo on Belle's social media account and reminisced about their moments together, which brought a smile to his face. He even liked the photo she had posted. Now his days at school felt empty, and he often found himself gazing at the class across the hallway, just as Belle used to do. When a girl smiled at him, S would see her as Belle and kept imagining her in everything he did. At that time, he shared these feelings with Tumin, who thought S was missing Belle, similar to how Tumin missed Punk. All S wanted was to meet Belle again. He gave Tumin Belle's new phone number, hoping Tumin would share it with Punk. Tumin also told S that Punk had messaged him about Belle's acceptance to Chungmei University, which made S even sadder because it would become harder to see Belle. Since that day, S began to imagine Belle's presence more vividly and started listening to love songs as she had suggested. In the final scene, S was on a bus and saw a girl who resembled Belle. He slowly approached her, but the bus suddenly braked, causing his shoulder to touch the girl's. Surprisingly, the girl turned out to be Belle. She revealed that she had been accepted to a university in Bangkok, but asked Punk to keep it a secret from S. This left S curious about her reasons, but Belle didn't explain and made the atmosphere awkward. There, S tried to lighten the mood by mentioning that he had started listening to love songs as she had suggested. A little while later, the bus stopped near S's house, and he had to get off right away. At that time, Belle walked with him to the bus door, and they waved goodbye to each other. Just before the bus started moving, S asked Belle if they would see each other again, and Belle said yes. This made S smile with happiness. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if you want someone to like you, just keep accidentally bumping into them on buses until they can't resist your charm.